Welcome to the Human Experience Podcast, the only podcast designed to fuse your left and right brain hemispheres and feed it the most entertaining and mentally engaging topics on the planet. As we approach our ascent, please make sure your frontal, temporal and occipital lobes are in their full upright position. As you take your seat of consciousness, relax your senses and allow us to take you on a journey. We are the Intimate Strangers. Thank you for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. My name is Xavier Katana. We have Dr. Dennis Mckenna with us. Hopefully the sound, we had a little bit of a sound issue. I apologize for that. Hopefully the sound is better now. I think it is. Dennis, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Xavier?
I just had a mini heart attack, but I'm okay. I'm coming back.
No kidding. Well, we have something to talk about because I just had an angioplasty.
Oh man, what happened?
Yeah. You know what that is?
No, tell me what it is.
Well, it's basically I had some blocked coronary arteries, and it's a procedure to unblock those. They basically, you don't need to go into the details, but let's. The point is that it clears out my arteries and I'm supposed to feel much better. But I just had it 2 or 3 days ago, and frankly, I feel like I've been mugged, but I think I'll bounce back from that pretty soon. But it's no fun, but it was a necessary thing to do. And I think, I think it'll pay off in the long run, literally in the long run. This will help me make me good to go for the next 20 years.
Wow.
I hope it's better because it was really a miserable procedure.
Actually, last time that we got in touch, I had this weird intuition. I was a little bit worried about you. And I think I even texted you. I was like, Dennis, is everything okay? So, I mean, you're still here. You're planning on going strong. You're not leaving us anytime soon, are you?
No, I'm going strong. I'm fine. Other than that, did you say you had a heart attack recently?
No, that was a joke. I was being facetious. Only because the sound. We had a sound issue, but it's fine now. I'm hearing that it's fine now. Okay. So,
well, we don't need to get into each other's medical histories too much, but yeah, it happens. It's one of the joys of getting old, Xavier. I crossed the threshold to 72 last December, so I'm definitely feeling. I am one of the elders. People have been calling me an elder for years, and now I guess I've grown into the part because I've had that and a couple other things, but nothing serious. Nothing. Well, I mean that part was fairly serious, but it's the kind of thing. If you do something about it, if you ignore it, then eventually you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke. But you can, you can do things to prevent that, and that's what this procedure was all about.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're okay, man. You are an elder, and many people look up to you and your work, and it's so important that you're here with us, and especially nowadays where it feels like more and more we're entering this weird, strange, totalitarian dystopia. I'm not sure where the world is right now, but we need you more than ever now. So, I mean, I'm glad you're here, man. What's new? Go ahead.
Too. I mean, compared to the alternative, I'm damn happy to be here. Dystopian or not, it's good to be alive. I mean, I still have a lot to do. I need to be around and stir up trouble. That's what I do. And so I'm grateful for high-tech medicine, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Wow, man. I'm glad that things are okay. What on the science side of things and your work, what's something that you've been working on? What's the most recent thing that you've been working on?
Well, a couple of things. If and many things actually. If you look in the chat box, I put a couple of links in there. One is to the Mckenna Academy.
Hmm.
It's Mckenna.academy, this nonprofit I was talking to you about. And then the other one is to ESPD 55, which stands for Ethnopharmacologic Search for Psychoactive Drugs. This is a conference that we did in last May in the UK, May 2022.
Hmm.
And it was the 55th anniversary of the original conference in 1967, which was held in San Francisco under the sponsorship of the National Institute of Mental Health. And of course, I was 18 at the time. I had nothing to do with it. But the book that was published out of that was published the following year. And somehow I got my hands on it. And that really set the trajectory for my career, because I realized that this business of ethnopharmacology was a real discipline, and it was very interesting, and and there was a lot to be discovered. So uh, the government was supposed to follow up every 10 years or so with follow-up conferences. Well, the war on drugs intervened, and they became embarrassed that they had anything to do with this.
Hmm.
So it never happened. So I decided in 2017 I was going to do a 50th anniversary symposium
Hmm.
in commemoration of it, which I did in 2017. I, meaning me and a lot of friends, I had help with this, and we did that, and then we just did another 5-year follow up. So that's the 55. We did ESPD 50 and ESPD 55.
Hmm.
And people can look at the content of both of those if you go to espd55.com. It's open access. Well, give us your email, make a password, and everyone can see all the presentations on that site for both conferences.
So this
Uh,
is this is a symposium that discusses the various aspects of ethnopharmacology.
That's right. That's right. There's a lot of good material there for people to go through at their leisure. Mostly it's video presentations, but there's also, people can read the text as well, and dive deep into it. It's not exclusively about psychedelics. It's about, well, as the name implies, psychoactive drugs in general. So there are sections in there on Mitragynine, on Zoroastrian medicines. I mean, there's quite a range of material on that site. And if you're the kind of person that likes to listen to these presentations, there's hours and hours of recordings there that people can listen to.
Hmm. I mean, I
And it's
think so.
open.
It sounds like there's a lot more of these modalities that we can use to access our superconscious mind, and I think that might be more needed than ever at this time that we're in now.
Well, it seems so, yes. So I am encouraged by the, so-called psychedelic renaissance. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but at least psychedelics are being finally recognized and acknowledged for their value, for their therapeutic applications, and obviously for just tools for exploring consciousness. So that's encouraging. I don't think the last time we talked, much of that had happened. It was just beginning to happen. This
Hmm.
is something that's happened, that's taken shape really over the last decade, but really in the last 5 years or less. All of a sudden, the biomedical community is excited about it. You've got startups popping up everywhere like clusters of mushrooms. Everybody wants to cash in, and so it's encouraging in that. this whole area has been ignored, not only ignored, but actually prohibited and vilified for so long. It's taken so long for the scientific community to wake up to this, that these things are actually very important, both as medicines and also as basic tools for understanding the basis of consciousness.
Hmm.
So for somebody that's worked on this for over 50 years now, I'm really happy to see that it's getting attention.
Me too, man. And I notice it too in my life where there are people that I would think would never really approach plant medicine or anything like that, and they're approaching me and they're curious about things like ayahuasca and even ketamine. There's a friend of mine that is using that sublingually to help
Hmm.
with his depression, so it seems like it seems like this field of research is truly really opening up, and people are getting more curious about it and more access to it.
Yes, they're getting more access. Ketamine happens to be legal, so it seems to be the one that, because it's legal, people are using it, and there are clinics opening up, and I understand you can even order it by mail and have some, you know, by Zoom take you through the session. And so ketamine is not, in my opinion, the medicine of choice. But it is available and it is legal. I'm looking forward to the day when psilocybin, which I think is the medicine of choice in most cases,
Hmm.
uh, I'm looking forward to the day when that becomes more available. And that's happening, as you know, on state levels at least, and community levels. It should just be decriminalized, on the national level, and it should be available to people. And that's coming.
Hmm.
These things take a little time, but I think psilocybin, kind of all of them, maybe it's just my own personal bias, but I feel like psilocybin is just about the most suitable psychedelic, the most perfect psychedelic in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Uh, of course, much of my work, if not most of it, has been devoted to ayahuasca.
Yes.
And, that one also is very important. But I feel that one, I've sort of gone through an evolution in my feelings about it, having to do with the fact that it's very much an indigenous medicine. Not that mushrooms aren't, but mushrooms are sort of removed from that. But ayahuasca is an indigenous medicine, and there are issues around the exploitation of it,
Hmm.
the sustainability of the supply,
Hmm.
impact on indigenous communities.
Hmm.
Uh, it's not an entirely positive thing. I mean, it's positive in a lot of ways. I have in the past organized ayahuasca retreats myself
Hmm.
and seen lots of wonderful results. I've seen people have tremendous breakthroughs. And so there's no doubt that it's a healing medicine. And I'm hopeful that some way can be found in which even ayahuasca can be brought to the people in North America and Europe, but not necessarily bring the people in North America and Europe to the Amazon.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's been the model so far, but maybe that's not the best way to go about it.
Yeah, yeah. I have extensive experience with ayahuasca. Not to say that I know anything about it. I just, I've had probably 100 sessions or so, 100 sittings with the tea, and it's really completely changed my entire perspective on reality and who I am and what I am.
Yeah, yeah, that's what they do.
That's what they do. I mean, how many compounds are there that produce a state of neurogenesis in the brain? Is it like LSD, ketamine, MDMA, psilocybin, DMT, ayahuasca. Is there one I'm missing? Iboga.
Well, iboga, yeah, I think you pretty well covered it. I mean, all of these do to a certain extent, and part of this comes from the fact that they all interact more or less selectively with the certain subpopulation of serotonin receptors, the so-called 5-HT 2A receptors. 5-HT is, of course, 5-hydroxytryptamine. That's another alternative term for serotonin. So the serotonin 2A receptors, there are about 14 different types of serotonin receptors in the brain and in the body. It's not confined to the brain.
Hmm.
The 2A receptors seem to be the common targets of all of these compounds that we think of as the true psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, DMT, 5-methoxy-DMT. MDMA is actually not a psychedelic in that sense. It's got a slightly different mechanism of action. Actually, quite a different mechanism of
Hmm.
action. It does interact with serotonin, but
Hmm.
it doesn't interact with the same receptors. It actually, uh, the MDMA targets the serotonin transporters, the serotonin reuptake pumps that are the same target that SSRIs target. So SSRIs, as the name implies, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. They prevent the reuptake of serotonin into the presynaptic neurons, right? The serotonin is released into the synaptic cleft, and then there are pumps. There are the reuptake pumps. Their technical term is the serotonin transporter that grab that serotonin in the synaptic cleft and suck it back up and repackage it, right? And then reuse it, essentially recycle it, because serotonin is hard to make. So, metabolically speaking, so serotonin is reused. And that's what SSRIs do. They prevent the reuptake of serotonin, and as a result, there's more serotonin in the synaptic cleft
Hmm.
than there normally is, and so you feel better. MDMA targets those same transporters, except so if SSRIs prevent, if the serotonin transporter is a vacuum cleaner, think of it, that takes up the serotonin from the synaptic cleft, the SSRIs jam that vacuum cleaner closed, so it doesn't uptake serotonin anymore. MDMA does the exact opposite. It jams it open.
Hmm.
And so all the serotonin leaks out and floods the brain with serotonin, which happens to be, you feel very good. It's a euphoric experience. And that's the mechanism of action of MDMA. So strictly speaking, MDMA is not a psychedelic,
Hmm.
but it is in this, strict way, kind of strict definition we're thinking of. But it does have obviously psychoactive effects, and it can be very therapeutic. That being washed in the euphoria inducing effects of serotonin. It's like being in love, right? There's a reason they call these things the love molecules,
Right.
MDA, MDMA, that sort of thing.
The love drugs. Yeah.
Well,
I've always been curious, Dennis, about how neurologically, why is it that you can have an ayahuasca experience one day and then the second day take the same amount of dose and then have such a wider range of an experience versus like psilocybin, you take it one day. If you take it the next day, you're not gonna have that same sort of breakthrough. There's a tolerance that happens. What's going on in the brain that causes this, creates this?
well, the interesting thing about this is like psilocybin And most of the classic psychedelics like LSD and mescaline and so on, they do have tolerance. So if you do them on successive days, you're going to have to either increase the dose to get the same effect. I mean, that's what you have to do, or you have to settle for lesser effect or you have to knock off for a few days. I mean, it builds up tolerance very quickly, and tolerance goes away very quickly. The one exception to this, which is very interesting, the one exception to this is DMT. DMT apparently does not have tolerance, and DMT, as you know, is the main psychedelic ingredient in ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm.
It's the beta carbolines in the vine of ayahuasca that potentiate the DMT orally, basically that prevent it from being broken down in the gut. So it's
Right.
absorbed. DMT by itself is not orally active because it's broken down by monoamine oxidase in the gut. But if you take it in the brew with beta carbolines from the other plant, the vine,
The MAOI.
carbolines inhibit monoamine oxidase, so then they protect the DMT, and they allow it to be orally active. And instead of 20 minutes or 30 minutes at most, which is what happens when you smoke DMT,
Mm-hmm.
you get 6 or 7 hours. But DMT is one of the few, maybe the only one I know of, that actually does not have a tolerance. And Rick Strassman did his pioneering work on DMT back in the 90s.
Yes.
He investigated this. He gave people successive massive doses of DMT on successive days over a period of days. There was no attenuation of the effect at all, which is interesting. And it's also interesting, of course, that DMT is a natural constituent of the brain, right? We know that the brain does make DMT. It doesn't make any of these other things. It makes 5-methoxy DMT,
Mm-hmm.
and that may escape the tolerance. The tolerance as well. I don't know that anyone has looked at that, but these other things like psilocybin, they will induce tolerance if you take them in successive days.
That's absolutely fascinating.
Reasons for that it's hard to say. I don't know if anyone knows.
Huh. I mean, it's so curious to me. DMT. I mean, maybe it is the spirit molecule. Then maybe it does have a specific property that allows. I mean, like you said, it does exist within the body already. And is it accurate that DMT is released when you're having like a dream?
It's tempting to think so, but probably not. It's an interesting idea that the visions of dreams probably come from DMT, but there's a whole mythology that's grown up around DMT, Xavier, that probably needs to be corrected in some way. There's a whole mythology about how the pineal gland synthesizes DMT, and when the third eye opens, it's the DMT that is being released from the pineal gland. Mm-hmm. It's a very romantic idea, but the fact is, what we know now is that the pineal would have to make an extraordinary amount of DMT in order to actually flood the rest of the nervous system, the rest of the cerebral cortex. It's just not possible. It does make DMT.
Mm-hmm.
Not clear what it does, why it does that. It's one of the pineal hormones, along with melatonin and pinealine, which is a natural beta carboline analog. We know that the pineal gland works in the regulation of circadian rhythms and the sleep-wake cycle. I mean, this is all modulated by melatonin, which is a tryptamine, very similar to DMT and serotonin structurally, but melatonin is in control of this light dark uh, cycle of sleep and waking. When your eyes are closed, when you're asleep, melatonin levels are high. When you open your eyes, melatonin is destroyed by light. So the levels of melatonin go down very, very rapidly. So, and that's all going on. The good news is that, you know, the sort of myth of the DMT and the pineal gland is just that. It's a myth and it's not supported by neurophysiology. But what has been discovered in the last maybe 5 or 10 years by another group of researchers is that DMT is present in various parts of the brain, not just the pineal gland, but the cerebral cortex, other parts of the brain, and it's present at levels that are comparable to serotonin and dopamine and some of these other neurotransmitters. It is one of the players that is creating and modulating our subjective experience. So DMT is very much part of the picture here, and that part of it needs to be investigated further because it may not be as exciting in some way, but it's probably that's where it's at.
Yeah.
That needs to be looked into. What exactly are the functions of DMT? In ordinary consciousness. If there is such a thing as ordinary consciousness,
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that there's consciousness at all is kind of extraordinary.
I mean, it's a lot to think about and process. I love hearing you talk about how it affects the brain and I mean specifically about DMT. I think you're right. I think it does uh, merit more exploration, just so we can understand it better. I mean, and you're right. There is this sort of romantic mythos around, what the pineal gland does and DMT itself. And there's something else that I heard was that there is this sort of, I mean, how can anyone verify this? But there's this sort of rush of DMT in the brain when a person passes on, when a person dies.
This is another thing. Yes, I mean this is possible. I mean that is the idea that when a person passes on in the near-death experience, the pineal cranks up DMT and releases a massive flood of it, into the brain. Most likely it's not that, but it may be that when you die or in that transition, that other parts of your brain are releasing a lot of DMT. I mean, I think DMT may have to do with the near-death experience. It's just not triggered by the pineal as such. It's triggered by other parts, other release from other parts. And there's interesting work that's been done with DMT in terms of its neuroprotective properties and like in stroke and this sort of thing. There's the work of Edie Frixka in Budapest has shown that in animal models of stroke and ischemia is the term, oxygen starvation. The brain is damaged in stroke because of a lack of oxygen. So this is what really results in the irreversible damage to neuron. The irreversible death of neurons is a result of anoxia or lack of oxygen. DMT actually protects this. So protects against this, essentially prevents it for a period of time. Obviously, if you're dying, eventually it overcomes that. But Edie has even suggested that there should be syringes of preloaded DMT on crash carts, so that when somebody gets a stroke, they're immediately hit up with DMT.
Wow.
And what that may do to their consciousness, who knows? But what it may do on the physiological level, it may buy them an extra 30 minutes or so before you begin to get that neurological destruction of these neurons due to anoxia. So it's a way to buy time effectively. And now, I don't know if you're ever going to get the FDA to approve that kind of treatment, but it's very possible. I mean, I would say, you have to take a. I mean, the FDA has approved some pretty wild stuff, and I wouldn't say necessarily they wouldn't, but you'd have to make a good case for it. And what you can demonstrate in an animal model is very different when you're giving it to humans, but there's reason to think that this could be an effective treatment for preventing the worst kind of damage associated with strokes and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there are areas like states that are bringing psilocybin for the treatment of depression. Ketamine's being used for depression. So why not shoot someone with some DMT if they're having a stroke? Why not?
Well, there's no reason not to. It's just that you have to. Yeah, I mean, there's good reason to do it. But FDA is a fair. FDA will approve this thing if you can make a case for it. You'd be surprised what FDA would approve. Well, just look at what it's done. The scientific studies that are coming out are all under FDA approved protocols. So if you can just dissociate politics from this. And the FDA is pretty good about that. I mean, the FDA makes their assessments based on science, so you have to hand it to them in that way. If a protocol seems reasonable and safe, then chances are you can get it approved,
And it's really interesting, Dennis. Like I said, I've had over 100, probably 150 or so sessions with ayahuasca, and just the other weekend I probably had one of the most, you would think, life-changing visions I've ever had. I mean, I was just sitting there with my mouth open, my face is just melting at just the bliss of what I was encountering in that state. And then it's like that Buddhist koan where it's like, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Because all I could think about after the experience was being back at that place. That's all I wanted. That's all I thought about. And it even became like a weight that I felt, like a physical burden, because I'm like, what am I doing here when I could be in this like infinite bliss state all the time that's somewhere else?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I love that koan. That's one of my favorite koans because I think that's the essence of what we do with these states. You have the experience, and then you internalize that, and what is there to do but chop wood, carry water? But you chop wood, carry water in light of the fact that the transcendent dimension is all around us, and we know that, it's just a tiny molecular tweak in our neurochemistry opens up this whole world of wonder that, you can live your entire life and never suspect that exists.
Mm-hmm.
but once you look, once you look beyond the chrysanthemum, as they say, you know that this world is there. And, this is one of my criticisms in some ways of the whole popular fad about microdosing.
Mm.
Uh, I think that microdosing may be fine and it may help for some people with with depression and that sort of thing. But it's, I mean, people that use something like psilocybin for microdosing, if they if they feel like they benefit from a daily use, of a low dose, then there's really no harm in it. My question is it a placebo effect?
Hmm.
And is it an excuse for not looking beyond the chrysanthemum? I
Hmm.
mean, people should look beyond the chrysanthemum once in a while to remind themselves what is what's out there, what the possibilities are out there.
Yeah.
And the microdose is not going to give that to you. So I think it shouldn't be an excuse for taking the plunge into the, whatever you want to call it, the numinous pool of that you can immerse yourself at high psychedelic doses.
Hmm.
you know and for another, for much the same reason, I totally do not think that, there are certain companies now that are trying to develop non-psychedelics that are, psychedelic molecules that have had the trip engineered out of them.
Hmm.
So just do these neurochemical tweaks, but you never actually have to confront the experience. I think that this is complete misunderstanding, and it's not going to work. I mean, I think that people need to have the actual subjective experience in order to stimulate this neurogenesis and this reconnection that we know goes on. I don't think you can spend years, in a state of trauma, a state of PTSD or intractable depression and so on, and then take some molecule that has no subjective perceptible effect, and suddenly the next morning you're fixed. I don't think it works that way. I think that psychedelics, as we've always been told by the indigenous people who, they've only been doing this for 10,000 years or more. So, they know a thing or two about how this works. And how it works is you've got to have the context. You have to have the therapeutic context, what they often call set and setting.
Hmm.
You have to have an appropriate setting. You need the ritual context in order to structure the experience. Like, I tell people sometimes ayahuasca is a vessel. It will fill whatever vessel you put it in. Ayahuasca is a liquid, I say. It'll fill whatever vessel you put it in, whether that's a traditional, Amazonian shamanic context or whether that's a neo shamanic, you know, context in Marin or something, or a very psychotherapeutic context. The point is there needs to be a context for the experience to unfold. I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about a individual's encounter with this medicine. I mean, that's the crux of it
Hmm.
right there. But the person needs support, and if you take one of these molecules and expect nothing to happen, guess what? Nothing is going to happen, and it's not going to work. You know, that's my feeling, at least.
There's a lot to unpack there, man. I think microdosing definitely has its place, and there are people that I know that I can visibly see that they're better through microdosing, and there is very direct aspect of affecting a person's neurophysiology and their general mood every day. But I also agree, with what you said, which is that if you're going to encounter this experience, go all the way, dive in, and have a sort of experience that lifts the veil and lets you move through, and maybe you get a chance to see what's behind there.
Yeah, and I think that's, and then after that, after you've had these profound transformative experiences, the microdosing can be useful, I think more useful for maintenance and sort of, to maintain the experience and to effectively touch as a touchstone to help recollect this experience. But I think that psychedelics they don't demand much, but what they demand is courage. You have to have enough courage to take the chance. You have to trust yourself. You have to trust the medicine. You have to trust the circumstances, the set and setting. And when all those conditions are optimum, then you can have an experience that's life changing. And this is why I think psychedelics should be approached carefully, respectfully, thoughtfully, and so that you can maximize the benefit, and if that's the point,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say, I mean, I do not say that, like everybody is, in some ways everyone can use healing, right? I don't think there's anybody that is not damaged. You can't live in this culture and not be traumatized.
Right.
So we all need the help that psychedelics can provide. I don't think that very many people are, we're not immune to it. And so and other people have serious, intractable, diagnosable, problems that they can benefit from. But you don't have to have a diagnosis. You don't have to be mentally ill to benefit from psychedelics, in the strict clinical sense. Psychedelics can benefit, the high functioning, well individual as well as a person that, needs treatment.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're mentally ill, I think you should definitely have an experience like that, and approach ayahuasca with great reverence. Even if I think some people feel a sort of call, a pull, an intuitive pull, whether it's something that exists spiritually or less than that. I'm not sure, but it's almost like a magnetism that they feel, of a pull towards drinking this tea, and then when you drink it, I think it's very, very, it's like an ego destroying machine. So you for me, I approach every single session with great respect, reverence, with my head it bowed, and just begging for my life, basically, because I've had enough sessions to know that if I try to walk upstream in this river, it's just, I'm not going to last very long. So now I beg for mercy, and then if the tea shows me what it needs to, or what I
Right.
needed it to.
Quite so. Quite so. Uh, yeah, as we often say about ayahuasca, you will not get necessarily what you want, but you will always get what you need. And that's a simple statement, but it's really profound in a certain way, because this fusion of the medicine and the person, that's where the rubber meets the road, and everything else around that is necessary, but it's supportive if it's properly structured, if it's properly orchestrated, then it's supportive of profound interaction between you and the medicine, and that's about as personal as it gets. You can't delegate somebody else to have your psychedelic experience for you, any more than you can delegate someone to, be born for you or die for you or make love for you. There are just certain things you got to do yourself, you know, and psychedelics are one of those things.
I think, Dennis, I think here is a plant, right? And it's infinitely smarter than you are, infinitely more old than you could ever even conceptualize, right? And now you're merging it with your consciousness, your body, and so there has to be an aspect of surrender. It knows more than you could ever possibly even imagine, to think of what reality is. It's not like we've ever even seen something with our own eyes. We see the light bouncing off of things, right? Like if you're looking at a tree, you're not even experiencing that tree fully. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there is something. If there's anything that's going to save humanity, it will be plant medicine.
Well, I think it's part of the equation for sure, because I think that, yeah, I think that the chief threat that the planet faces is the fact that we are so out of sync with nature. We are so estranged from nature that we no longer appreciate it, and we've come to believe that we are running the show, and that's the wrong perspective. And one thing that ayahuasca and all these other things always remind me: you monkeys are not running this show, right? It's the plants are running the show, but in the wider context, it's the community of sentient species, and we're the ones that are out of harmony. We're the ones that are estranged from nature, and we're just like drunken maniacs running around destroying things because of this. And this, psychedelic can be a wake up call to you know wake up to what we're doing, wake up to how estranged we are from nature, and maybe change at least our attitude, toward that. And I think that's something that psychedelics have always done. They've been, in some sense, these things have a cultural context, right? But they also have a biological context, and that's where the level that they work on comes. These are symbiotic partners with our species, and if we have been the steward, indigenous people have been the stewards of this knowledge, because nobody else cared. Now the rest of the world is beginning to understand what a treasure this is. And of course, the first impulse is to take it away from the indigenous people, patent it, and turn it into, a business and so on. This is sort of the dark side of psychedelic capitalism and so on. And it's a complicated thing, because it's going to take capitalism, it's going to take business efforts to bring these things online, to bring them into medicine and so on. But we shouldn't forget that there's a wider context to all this. So, and the context is evolutionary and co-evolutionary. And so, we should remember that we monkeys are not running this show, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I've brought scientists onto the show, and I asked them, what can we do, and is it too late? And they tell me, yeah, it was 20 years ago it was too late, 30 years ago it was too late. But Dennis, there's a question, but just to touch on that a little bit more, it's important, I think, that these plants are bringing us to a point of harmony with our ecological understanding of where the world is and where we fit in that picture of that world. Because if we don't find a balance very soon, maybe humans will find out they're not the apex predators that they think they are.
Well, this is a lesson that we need to learn. I mean, it's easy to say, 20 years ago it was easy to say it's too late. 30 years ago it was easy to say it was too late. Now it's easy to say it's too late. Despair is never a solution.
Hmm.
Despair is a weak excuse. It's not too late. It's never too late. There is a way to save this thing. But first of all, we have to wake up. That's that's job number one. And if enough people wake up, then we can come together and, I mean, the planet is extraordinarily damaged, but it's not life on Earth that's, life on Earth is incredibly adaptive, and sometimes I say Gaia is one tough bitch. Gaia is not going to go extinct. Life will
No.
survive.
Yeah.
We, on the other hand, may
Yeah.
not survive. And
Yeah.
that may be a blessing for the earth if we don't survive. But what kind of damage are we going to it on the way out? When we're on the way out.
Right.
So I would like to believe that we can wake up and we can partner with nature to try to set things right. Nature has incredible ability to heal itself if we'll just let that process happen. But it happens over time frames that we cannot really comprehend. I mean, Earth plays out its drama, if you will, over timescales of millions of years.
Mhm.
And we don't think in those terms. I mean, it's all we can do to think about the next 50 years. you
Yeah.
know we're not even very good at that. Hell, we can't even think the next quarter. And this is
Next
part of
15
the
minutes.
yeah, we don't have this long-term perspective. I have no concern that life will survive on the planet, until the sun goes nova or whatever happens. It won't be the life that we see now. Life evolves, it changes, it adapts. But there will be life on Earth until the very end. We may not be there. It's looking maybe like we won't be there to to participate in this. And certainly we are responsible for a lot of the damage that's happening. Maybe we can wake up and maybe not. I don't know.
I think it would take a disaster for us to wake up, because I mean humans are such a destructive species. Everywhere we go, we destroy. I think other plants and animals, they have this sort of natural equilibrium with their ecology, where they are and how they live, and except humans don't do that. We go into the rainforest and we destroy that. I mean, you name it, wherever we go on this planet, we seem to destroy. So maybe it would take an event for that to change. Dennis, there's a question I've wanted to ask you for so many years now. Um, okay. The setting is the Amazon jungle, right? You've got hundreds of thousands of species of plants everywhere. How does it indicate a science if these two plants are combined together? How much trial and error would it take for an indigenous species to understand? Where did they get this idea of mixing this MAOI and this DMT to make ayahuasca?
Well, people ask me this all the time, and it's not such a mystery. In some ways, it really isn't that much of a mystery. For one thing, DMT is very widespread in nature. It's such a simple molecule. It's two steps away from tryptophan, which is the amino acid, and everything and every living thing that we know of contains tryptophan because it's one of those that comes is one of the 30 amino acid that makes up protein. So tryptophan is everywhere, and tryptophan is the precursor to DMT and all these other tryptamines that are out there. So those plants are abundant. Beta carbolines are also abundant. uh, not quite as much as the tryptamines, but still they're not uncommon. So the idea that people would, I mean, actually, if you look at ESPD 50,
Hmm.
not 55, if you look at ESPD 50, there's an very interesting lecture by Manolo Torres, who is an archaeologist and ethnobiologist, talking about a culture uh, of people that were in indigenous groups that were in the area around where Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela come together. And these people were into chicha. They were brewers essentially, and they made all kinds of chicha from different, and chicha's the fermented beer, right? And they were kind of like craft brewers. They actually made chicha from basic ingredients, but then they put things into the chicha to see how they affected it or made it taste different. They were experimentalists, and
Hmm.
somewhere in that process, they managed to get this combination. I mean, they had snuffs, right? They had the DMT containing snuffs. They had Banisteriopsis as well that they used for other things. Not for psychoactive effects, but for other as purgatives mostly. And it's not unreasonable to think that they would have chosen to, just almost at random chosen, well, we've got this on the shelf and this on the shelf. Let's put them together. Let's put them into the next batch of chicha. And they do several rounds of that. And sooner or later, they're going to stumble on the right combination, but it's not it's not unreasonable to think that they would do that. I mean, it's not like it was some mystical revelation. They'd like to put it that way, but it's not that way. That suddenly, they got the insight that if you combine these plants, you'll have the magical brew of ayahuasca. It happens through a process of trial and error and seeing what works. I mean, shamans, are kind of experimentalists. I mean, they're very much experimentalists. They muck around with plants. They try different combinations and see what works and see, what the effects are. This is how, and this you get this tradition very much in mestizo and indigenous shamanism these days. The whole idea of the dieta in mestizo shamanism, the idea that you do the dieta with different plants in order to understand what those plants' properties are, what they're good for, with ayahuasca, as the teacher, as the thing that opens the door into insights about how these plants operate.
Hmm.
So within that tradition, it's not too surprising that they made these discoveries, and that's probably how it happened.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, you might be right about that. I like to think there's some deeper mystery, back there somewhere. And there might be a friend of mine is asking me to ask you about um, the purging process when a person drinks ayahuasca. Does that is there a spiritual context to that, or do you think that ayahuasca serves as a type of dewormer or cleansing uh, tool?
Yes, yes. I mean, in the traditional context, all these purgative plants and purgation as such is part of ethnomedicine, and it's understood to be cleansing. I mean, that's what it is. It is, and in fact, it is cleansing because of the parasites and all that. But it also, I mean, that's an obvious, benefit that it is anti-parasitic. You don't have to have parasites though to benefit from cleansing. And I think that ayahuasca more than and you don't have to have purging either. I mean, people don't purge as a rule on psilocybin, or some of these other things. You don't have to purge, but to get a tremendous psychedelic experience. But that's something that is kind of unique about ayahuasca, and I think that again, not everybody purges on ayahuasca, but I think that it's important to purge. I think that this is something that ayahuasca brings to the experience that is a good thing because the it's a mind body medicine more than perhaps psilocybin. Psilocybin is maybe more cerebral.
Hmm.
Ayahuasca is very much about the mind and the body, and so it cleanses the mind, but it also cleanses the body. And I think that that's an important. My own personal bias is that that's an important aspect of the ayahuasca experience, and I think, in some ways, I think that this is one of the deficiencies or drawbacks of these ayahuasca analogs that people are trying to develop now, based on synthetic combinations or generally synthetic combinations. And the perception is that, well, if we can just engineer the purge out of the ayahuasca experience, it will be much more
Mm.
pleasant for people, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But that's a misunderstanding of it. Ayahuasca is not supposed to be pleasant. It's not supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be transforming. And purging is part of doing the work, I believe. And
It's work.
yeah, it is work. And people should not people should not view the purging anymore as an undesirable side effect any more than they should view the psychedelic experience as an undesirable side effect, like some of these companies are trying to do with, engineer these molecules that are tripless psychedelics. It's bullshit, and it's a complete misunderstanding of what is going on here, I believe. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, they may be able to come up with an analog that has no psychedelic effects, whatever, and that will fix your depression or trauma or addiction or whatever. But I wouldn't lay money on it, and unfortunately, a lot of people are laying money on it in the sense that, there's a lot of investment capital going to develop these things. It's a waste of time. It's
Hmm.
not going to work, in my
Hmm.
opinion. It's just a complete waste of time, and it largely is being done by people that have never taken a psychedelic, so they have no idea what they're, I mean, I don't know if that's true, but
Hmm.
I think anybody who's taken a psychedelic can see that this is just a dry hole. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
You cannot separate the experience from the therapeutic effect. You just can't.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think there are definitely sessions that I've had where, I don't purge. And I think it's very dependent on how you're treating your body. You know,
Yes.
if you're putting things in your body that are bad and bad for your body, the tea will not really, it's not really a punishment. But it's more of like just pulling that out of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that with ayahuasca you must purge to have a good experience. I mean, yeah, I don't purge on ayahuasca every time either. Uh, so you don't have to purge to get a good experience. Think of it as a bonus. This is a feature that you don't get with other psychedelics. You don't have to get it every time, but like you say, it depends on what you've been eating, how you've been treating your body, and so on. A lot of people have diets that are not very good, and so on. So like this goes back to the mind body medicine aspect of it. It will fix your body, it will treat your mind, and these things are not really separate. So I think I think in some, maybe I'm just a traditionalist. I guess I
Hmm.
am.
Yeah.
you know uh I mean, I'm an old guy, I'm set in my way, and I know that but I really feel that you know this is the right way to approach it. Don't engineer the trip out of the molecule. Don't attempt to engineer the purge out of ayahuasca. It is not it is not a undesirable side effect. It is a feature, because purging is catharsis, right? And
Hmm.
psychedelics don't always do that, but catharsis is, the term, right? I mean,
Yeah.
catharsis is a kind of a spiritual shock. It's like spiritual shock treatment that really sets you back on your heels. And but then once you're on the other side of that, you realize that was renewing, that was rejuvenating, that was beneficial. And the body thanks you for it. And the mind thanks you for it. So
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think, I had Hamilton Morris on the show. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but
of
you have?
yeah, I know Hamilton. I've been on his podcast a few times, and
Cool. Well,
yeah, he's great.
he when we talked about ayahuasca, he was more like, oh well, I would rather not feel nauseous. I would rather not purge, and I would rather just get to the point of the hallucination or whatever you're going through, the trip aspect of it. And he talked about how there's a sort of almost it's almost like a sort of romantic notion that you're putting these toxins out of your body when you're just getting nauseous, and he's very science aspect, very
Right,
science viewpoint.
right. Well, I think it's a personal preference, but I feel, I mean, in my own experience with ayahuasca, I feel like the purging is really, you know,
Beneficial.
beneficial and almost necessary to achieve the higher levels of
Yes.
consciousness that you go into. I mean, most of my peak experiences happen when I'm kneeling in front of the toilet. I'm sorry, but that's the way it
It's
is.
all good.
So you don't have to purge, but generally, I mean, as you know from your own experience, when you purge, you know, then you feel better. It's not like you're nauseous the whole time. You take the ayahuasca, and after a while you begin to feel the effects, you begin to feel the physiological effects, and generally by the time you're ready to purge, you're also flying, you're
Mm.
well on the way. And then you can purge and you feel better. And then you're rid of it. The ayahuasca is ready to leave your body. It's done its job, so you purge it, you get rid of it, the trip continues, and then you can sort of go back to your spot and settle into it, you know. I mean, one of the reasons I rarely do a booster dose with ayahuasca is that, you know, it got to make me purge right away. There's no point, you know.
Mm,
So I can drink it and immediately I will lose it on that second dose.
mm,
So I try to take enough the first time that I don't have
mm,
to go for a booster.
hmm. Yeah, that's really intriguing. I've been meaning to ask you as well. You know, has your journey with psychedelics and these medicines, has it? I mean, I know you're a scientist, but has it opened you into a sort of spiritual perspective or a perspective of God, anything related to that?
Well, yeah, of course. I don't think you can have these experiences. I mean, that's sort of the point. I mean, I think one of the main things that I get from psychedelics, and I think a lot of people get, is the understanding, you know, I mean, it's a reminder of how little we know, you know, and that's an important take-home lesson. You know, I mean, scientists as a group tend to be a little arrogant because we tend to be full of ourselves in terms of, you know, we know so much about how things are, the way the universe is, the way things work. Actually, we don't know shit. And psychedelics reminds us of that, you know,
Yeah.
and that's a useful thing because, you know, humility in a scientist is a good quality and a rare quality. I think the greatest scientists, you know, not that I'm one, but I think the greatest scientists understand that we only under we only really comprehend a tiny amount, a tiny slice of reality, you know, and we may understand that very well, but there's an infinite amount of reality left to be
Hmm.
understood that we have no comprehension of at all.
Yeah.
So that's how you can, I think that as a scientist, I think that's how you can balance these things. Just remember, you know, we may know some stuff. Yeah, we know some stuff, but actually we don't know shit in terms of all there is to be known.
Yeah.
And the beauty of science, you know, I mean, if it's properly practiced, the beauty of science is that it always revises itself. Now, this isn't always the way it is done, but ideally, that's the way it's done because, you know, you never prove anything in science. You know, you only do not disprove things, you know, like you construct hypotheses, you construct your suppositions effectively in the way a phenomenon works. You know, it's a way to ask questions of nature that is very structured, almost like a dialogue with nature. My model is this. How does that fit with observed data? Oh, it doesn't fit very well. Okay, well, we have to revise the model, you know, and so you keep revising the model until it fits the data, until it explains whatever it is you're observing. But you have to always remember that there will be new information that may come along and totally overturn your understanding, and
Mm.
that's exciting. That's the point.
Hmm.
You construct hypotheses about how a natural phenomenon works, and then you try like hell to demolish the hypothesis, you know, find out what are the chinks, what are the deficiencies in this understanding, and they inevitably will come to the surface, and then you say, okay, we have to revise this model radically. It doesn't describe what we understand, or we have to shit can it completely and come up with something new, you know. And in this, you know, when that happens in science, then you get scientific revolutions, you know, the transition from Newtonian physics to relativity is one example of that. You know, Newtonian physics was very useful for explaining natural phenomena on the macro level. and it was useful, and it's still useful. We still use it, but we realize that there are aspects of phenomenon that it does not explain. And normally we don't have to worry about this because these are, quantum level or relativistic, levels. But the, Newtonian physics is just a useful model. It in no way explains, how reality is built.
Dennis, maybe you remember this is on the tip of my tongue. What's that book that's it basically just says that all of Christianity is based on basically the psilocybin mushroom. Do you remember what it's called? I can't recall. But
Christianity?
well, no. There was a book that someone wrote that basically intimates that all of Christianity is based on the psilocybin experience, the psilocybin mushroom itself.
Well, there are several of those. Are you thinking the immortality key?
No, that's not the one that I was thinking of.
Not
But
that.
but I'm glad you've heard of this. That seems really intriguing to me too. That maybe through ancient history we've been using these compounds, and then maybe at some point they become a type of religion.
Well, yes, they do. I mean, this is, yeah. I mean, this is I think an effect again of we have to create context for these things, and the whole set and setting thing is a reflection of this. But then there's also anytime you have a spiritually powerful technology like psychedelics, you're going to have certain people that want to co-opt that and organize, they want to own it and they want to use it basically for their own purposes, not necessarily nefarious. Their intention may be benign, but then sometimes it isn't benign, and then you get cults and this sort of thing.
Hmm.
And religion tends to do that. Religion will tend to, you know, grab onto something like the psychedelic experience and build a whole context of ritual and mystery around that. And then, if you look at the evolution of Christianity, which probably did have its roots in the use of psychedelics before, in the first to fourth centuries AD, these were basically these were mushroom cults, or it's not clear what the psychedelic was. Brian Marescu in the Immortality Key.
The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. That's the book I was thinking of.
The Sacred
John
Mushroom.
Allegro.
Right, John Allegro. Yeah, similar kind of idea, but his discussion of this was kind of different because he was basically a linguist. He was a philologist,
Mhm.
and he came up with. He was one of the original people that was selected to translate the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Hmm.
and he kept coming up against these terminologies in the Dead Sea Scrolls that clearly related to fungi,
Hmm.
and he thought, this is interesting. And so he came up with this idea that, it was some kind of a mushroom cult. And unfortunately, I think he got the wrong mushroom. I mean, it was about Amanita muscaria,
Yeah.
and I doubt that Amanita muscaria doesn't quite reach the bar of
Right.
a
I agree.
transcendent psychedelic. I mean, R. Gordon Wasson made the same mistake with soma. He speculated that soma was Amanita muscaria. I mean, the only problem with this is that, I mean, there are many problems with it, but one of the big problems is the pharmacology just not reach the level of a transcendent visionary experience. I mean, the effects of Amanita muscaria are pretty disappointing if you've ever taken it.
Yeah, I have, and you're right. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it
Dennis.
doesn't amount to much. It's kind of like, in my experience, it was something like a cross between an itch and a chill, and then eventually resulted in what amounted to, I felt like I was on a cheap drunk. I mean, it was very much like alcohol in its effects, and not very interesting to me. Now, other people have claimed that, you've got to process it a certain way, you have to dry it a certain way, and then, maybe there's some chemical transformation in there that that maybe you get some tryptamines or other compounds formed in the process of drying. But nobody's really looked into this, in any kind of systematic way. So Amanita muscaria, I mean, it is psychoactive for sure. But it's not a psychedelic. Pharmacologically, it's a GABA agonist. That's what it works on, is GABA, which
Yeah.
is the same neurotransmitter that alcohol works on, and
Yep.
kava and benzodiazepines, oddly enough.
Yeah. So Dennis, we actually on Twitter we have a space open right now where a bunch of people are gathered. I know they'd love to hear from you. I know that you don't use spaces, and it's cool if you don't want to, but it would be great if we could sort of move the conversation, and you could interact with some people that I'm sure would love to pick your brain on psychedelics if you have the time. If you don't have the time, it's okay. We can end it here. And this has been a great conversation. I love talking to you so much, and we can go on for hours. But I'd invite you to come and hang out with us for a little bit longer if you're open to it.
I can do it. I can do it for a little bit longer. What do I need to do?
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna end the show here on YouTube, and then
Okay.
Dennis, I'll send you a link, and you just click that link on Twitter, and it'll bring you into the space, and then on the bottom left there's a little microphone button. It'll say request microphone. You just request microphone, and I'll bring you up to the stage, and then we'll have a little bit more of a discussion. Cool?
Okay, so so you're gonna text me that link?
Yes. I'm gonna text it to you right now. Guys, if you're listening on YouTube, we're gonna move over to Twitter. Thank you guys. Dennis, this has been so great. I love hanging out with you, man, and it's don't go anywhere. We need you. We need you. We need you here on this planet.
Plans to go anywhere, Xavier. Don't worry. I'm gonna stick around for a while.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Guys, we're gonna get out of here at least on YouTube, but we are gonna go over to Twitter. If you're on Twitter, you can just look for Dennis's account, and he'll be in there. We retweeted that there was a space open, so we're gonna jump out of here and move over to there. If you've been listening, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Good night.
Always a pleasure. Okay, I'll look for that, and hopefully I can get on there. So I'll look for your text, okay?
Perfect, Dennis. That's
Here.
perfect. Thank you
Okay.
so much. I'll see you on Twitter.